Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final event from the Driving Health Project in the Healthy Working Lives seminar series, a possible solutions session followed by a virtual networking event. My name is Dr. Karijn van Vreden, and I am the project coordinator for the Driving Health Project, and I will be your MC for today's event. I would like to start off by acknowledging the sacred land of the Wurundjeri people on which we are based and pay our respects to the thousands of years of wisdom and knowledge found with the Indigenous owners of the land. Wominjeka. In today's seminar, we have the Driving Health lead researcher, Associate Professor Ross Iles from Monash University. We also have Senator Glenn Sterle, former truck driver, Labor Senator for WA, and Shadow Assistant Minister for Road Safety. We also have Jerome Carslake, Director for the National Road Safety Partnership Program. And we'd also like to welcome Ruth Oakden, the General Manager of Wellbeing at the Toll Group. Ross will do a short presentation around the findings of the Driving Health Allocator Training Program, followed by a discussion with Senator Sterle, Jerome and Ruth about where the industry goes from here. At any point during the seminar, if you want to submit a question, you can do so via the Ask a Question button below your live stream. Following the seminar, we'll have a short 5-minute break before the beginning of the networking session. You can access this virtual networking session by clicking the button below the live stream, or you can enter via the menu along the top of your screen by clicking on Driving Health Networking. We will have 2 rooms in this networking session. Room 1 will be focused around encouraging discussion on continuing to find solutions for the transport industry. This is your chance to have your say. In room 2, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions and meet the Driving Health researchers. Numbers are limited, so it's first in, best dressed. Over to you, Ross.
Thanks very much, Karijn. So this is the final seminar in the Driving Health series. And so we've really focused this seminar session on, well, where do we go from here? What are our possible solutions? We've got a great lineup of speakers. I'm going to give a very short presentation. I don't want to take up too much of the time, but I've got some important things to tell you about a potential solution that we've tried as part of the Driving Health project, and also some information of the very last phase of our research project. So I'll quickly go through some of those research findings, but I'm really interested today in the discussion. We've got some great examples of approaches to solutions, and then we can actually we've got some more examples to layer on top of that. So there's lots of interest in this area. We know there are a lot of problems, so let's start talking about the solutions and the things that we might be able to do. So if you've listened in to any of the seminar series so far, we've presented this slide a couple of times now, and this is the model that we've used to approach driver health and wellbeing. We've looked at the different domains that can impact drivers' health and wellbeing. We've looked at the personal domain, so what about the driver themselves, how old they are, and what they bring to the job. We've looked at the workplace environment. So we know that's quite specific for drivers in particular. Not only is it the cab, the truck that they're driving, but it's also the delivery centres and everywhere that they operate, the roads, and particularly where the rest areas, where I know it has a lot of focus. We'll talk a little bit about that today, I'm sure. We've looked at the occupational domain in terms of how the job is done. So is it about incorporating how drivers are paid? Are they paid for waiting time, even the type of vehicle that they drive and how that might impact their health? We've looked at their lifestyle domain factors, so what people eat, drink, how much exercise they get, and then also their health risks they might face, whether they're in pain, how well they sleep, even the medications that they take. And the outcomes that we've really focused on in the study is looking at things like psychological distress, I got there eventually, general health, but then also some driving outcomes, including the proportion of near misses and ability to do the job as rated by drivers themselves. And all of this sits within a regulatory domain. And it's really great to have Senator Glenn Sterle here today, who's really at that level of identifying, well, what are some of the rules and regulations that we need to put in place because all of those factors we talked about are all impacted by what are the rules and regulations that drivers need to follow. What can be done about that to actually put driver health and safety front and centre? And so today we're going to talk about some solutions, taking all of that into account. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Driving Health Allocator Training Program. So on that diagram I showed earlier, we identified there were a number of factors from different parts of that, all over that picture, that actually impact driver health. And when, as part of the driving health study, we looked at, well, what can we do? What's a possible solution? It was really clear that we can't just focus on the driver's capacity to cope with the stresses of the job. There needs to be ways that we can actually reduce the pressures that they face. Sure, it's absolutely important to empower drivers, give them the tools they need to cope with the job, but as Driving Health decided to look at, I guess, elsewhere, and we designed the Driving Health Allocator Training. Now, that training program was designed for the direct managers of drivers. And we know from research, when people are injured or ill at work, how their direct supervisor responds to them telling them that they're actually having difficulty can actually have a massive impact on how well they go and how soon they get back to work. So we developed this training. It involves a video which consists of dialogue drawn directly from the interviews we had with drivers to go through what are some of the factors that the manager might be able to influence in their role as a manager of a truck driver. And the aim of the program was really to increase the awareness of those managers of the things that they actually do have some control over in terms of their drivers' health. We piloted the program just before Christmas, unfortunately the busiest time for the transport industry. But we said, look, this is too important not to sit on and wait. We need to get it out there as fast as we can. We had 47 completions of the program, and you can see there nearly half of those actually had a history of being a driver themselves. And we captured a wide range of managers in terms of the numbers of drivers that they actually manage. We also had a range of experience, but I guess importantly, more than half had less than 5 years in their role. So it's a good chance to be increasing the awareness early on for people in those roles. And 70% had long haul operations as part of their company operations. So it's just a very quick snapshot of who was completing the Driving Health Allocator Training. And I guess the question is, did it change anything? And what we've got here is an indication of, before they watched the training video, the proportion that said they had an awareness of them actually being able to impact some of these factors for drivers. And on the right-hand side is the score the proportion that said that they could impact those things after watching the video. And what you can see in this diagram here is that the purple bars are quite big for the first, six or seven different factors. So managers were very aware that they had an impact on training level. That's not surprising. They had an impact on schedules. And even fatigue and sleep and mental health, though, there's quite a high level of awareness that they could affect those things with their drivers. But some of the things towards the bottom of that figure, so their potential to impact drivers' weight or the family and financial stresses that they're facing and the drivers' levels of physical activity, was actually quite low before they watched the video. And after the video, that level of awareness had increased. And what we actually found, we ran the statistics to show that it was actually a significant increase in those managers who were aware that they could actually impact some of those factors. And those factors at the bottom there are things that we found in the driving health study to be really quite important when it comes to driver health and wellbeing. So we've got early evidence to show that providing some online training to managers has the potential to increase, at the very least, their awareness of being able to influence some of these things. The things on the top of that diagram, where the awareness is already high, we need to shift to actually giving those managers the tools to actually have positive influences in that space. So why do we need effective solutions? I'm going to give you a very hot off the press figures here. This is the last phase of the Driving Health project. We were able to use the data that we gathered throughout the project and actually use some computer modelling to identify, well, what's going to happen in the next 10 years? If this current state of health that we've identified in the Driving Health Project stays the same in the next 10 years, we can expect the following from 2021 to 2030. That 6,067 lives will be lost due to work-related disease or injury. And that's a horrific number. But this is based on the information that we've gathered in the Driving Health Project and that we've cast forward in 10 years. It will cost $485 million in healthcare costs attributed to the work-related disease and injury amongst truck drivers. An overall $2.6 billion in lost productivity. And that's in terms of drivers not being on the road, wheels not turning, and also to the Australian society of having to cover the costs of providing the care that those drivers will need as a result. So there is a clear financial argument to making sure we improve the health and wellbeing of truck drivers, because we know these have been problems for a long time within the industry. I'm sure our guests that we'll be speaking to will say, well, we've heard these things before. From a personal perspective, well, let's put some dollars around it as to how important it is that we need to invest in improving the health and wellbeing of drivers. And as part of this modelling, we've actually identified the impact of, if we're able to reduce the impact of the diseases and the work injuries that drivers experience by just 2%, that equates to a saving in the next 10 years of $10 million worth of healthcare costs and $53 million in productivity. So we're not talking, we're not talking having to have a massive impact to actually generate the money, if you like, the money required to provide a return on investment for any of the solutions that we might put in place. So I just wanted to introduce these numbers. This is their preliminary findings. Watch this space. We'll actually, Driving Health will put these figures forward very soon. But hot off the press, we're talking significant amounts. So it's more important than ever to actually talk about the solutions, not only from a personal point of view for the people involved, but then also the financial costs. And I think what that means too is we also need to make sure we're looking across industries to say, how can we find solutions that we know there are challenges in truck driving. Sometimes those solutions have been found elsewhere, or there are things that we can find that we can apply to the transport industry. But that's enough for me. I'd like to introduce our first guest, Senator Glenn Sterle. So Glenn was born in Melbourne and raised in Perth. We won't hold that against him, and left school at 17 to work as a furniture removalist. Trucking runs in Glenn's veins. Not only was he a long distance driver himself, his father was a truck driver and his son followed suit as well. I think Glenn mentioned his son's been driving for about 11 years now. At the age of 20, Glenn founded his own business operating road trains throughout regional Australia before becoming an organiser with the West Australian branch of the Transport Workers Union in 1991. I'm not going to read the whole profile that's there, but Glenn has been the chair of the Senate Rural Regional Affairs and Transport References Committee for the last 13 years. And in 2018, he was appointed Shadow Assistant Minister for Road Safety. And of course, Glenn led the recent Senate inquiry into the sustainable and safe transport industry. So please stick with us. We'll pop up a holding slide and then we'll have a chat with Glenn.
Look, thanks very much for that introduction, Ross, and I really appreciate being given the opportunity to join this conversation. And I want to congratulate yourself, your team and Monash on your Driving Health Project work. Those figures that you've shown us, mate, are very, very alarming. I would say, knowing your fine work, Ross, that they'd be pretty conservative too. And who knows what effects the pandemic has had on us. But look, there are a myriad of things I want to talk about. I think there are a myriad of issues that we can go into, how we can reduce the harm and the deaths on our roads and look after truck drivers. And I know time is tight today. I honestly believe there's not one silver bullet, but there are a lot of things that can be done. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit that can be addressed by the states and the Commonwealth. But there's also, as you touched on in your introductory, that there is some regulatory change needed. And I know there's a lot of red tape in the transport industry, but one person's red tape can be someone else's life saved on the road. And that's where I want to talk about today if I've got the opportunity. So, Ross, I know that there are a number of things that we need to get through. I am passionate about this industry, as you said, 3 generations. And to the listeners out there, I'm not one that sits hiding in an office in Canberra with a suit and tie for 52 weeks of the year. I'm still out there driving road trains. I still like to keep my hand in it. I do a lot of charity work, and I've had the opportunity of not only keeping my feet firmly fixed on the ground, talking with truck drivers, but being out there with them, pulling road trains to the Kimberley. And the beauty of it is that I get to do it and I get to donate the money that would be paid as wages off to a charity, and very keen to participate today. So, Ross, thank you very much. Keep up the great work you are doing, mate. Those figures, they're not falling on deaf ears, and I'm very well aware of the work that you have done when you did front in Melbourne in person, and you shared with the committee into the road transport industry that I chaired some very alarming figures on mental health as well. So good on you, Ross, and thank you very much for having me today.
Thanks, Glenn. We really appreciate you joining us, and obviously you bring a wealth of experience, not only of the industry, but then also, in a position to lead things like the Senate inquiry. And I guess my first question is about that inquiry. From your perspective, we're really talking about that big box from the diagram that I talked about before. Have you seen much change since then? Perhaps that, you said red tape, things turn slowly. Have you seen anything sort of changing in the background from your perspective?
From a Commonwealth point of view, absolutely nothing. I saw there was an announcement, something about some training for apprentices, but that's an announcement that's gone nowhere. From a state point of view, I've noticed that a couple of states have picked up. I congratulate the West Australian government working with industry, and they put a $14 million investment into truck bays and rest areas, which is very important. I see the Tasmanian government's done some fine work down there too. But apart from that, mate, no, absolutely sadly, to the point where we've been snubbed by the government. And the worst part is that the recommendations were formulated after taking evidence, most importantly, as you know, Ross, from those involved in the industry, employers, employer groups, truck drivers, owner drivers, academics, trainers, and it wasn't just Glenn Sterle sitting there inventing something that I could make up after 2 years and write down some recommendations. So sadly, to give the industry a poke in the eye that we have received from the federal government is very disappointing. But we've been getting this for many, many years. And I firmly believe in my days as a youngster watching Get Smart, where goodness will always beat badness. So we'll continue shoulder to the wheel, and I refuse to let down the trucking industry in this nation by packing up shop and going away. There's a lot of hard work to be done. The basis for some reform, and let's talk about reform, is there, and it comes from the mouths of those that are involved in this fine industry.
So it sounds like there's not at that level at the moment, there's not a huge appetite to make change. Do we need to throw numbers around like $2.6 billion in the next 10 years to actually get the right people to take notice? Is that the issue, or is there something else that we need to do to get people to sit up and take notice? So there's more of us jumping up and down.
Yes, Ross, look, it's one of the tools available, but there are figures thrown around all the time, the deaths in the transport industry. We know it's Australia's most dangerous industry. We know a lot of the decent men and women in this industry, put their lives on the line to buy their first truck, second truck, third truck. We mustn't forget the employees in this nation. The majority of them are very decent people. The sad part is we have in this nation that the truck drivers and the road transport operators themselves, Ross, do not have a representative collective voice in the nation's capital. Now, in the states, some of the states have got some fantastic relationships with their state governments, and I tilt my hat to the state organisations who do the heavy lifting, who have done the heavy lifting, particularly through the pandemic, but not limited to. But we need a voice in Canberra that truly represents the road transport industry. It can be done. It's not hard, Ross, because when I get all the transport representatives in the same room, which I've done in Canberra on a number of occasions, 60, 70 of them, we absolutely know and we understand and we agree. The majority of issues we have, we all share. We all agree on that. The things that divide us, we park to one side. But there's so much more that unites us than divides us. And I know that if I have the opportunity, the voice of the Australian road transport industry will be heard in Canberra, and it will be heard from those out there doing it, not ones that pertain to represent industry who truly have a very narrow focus. Talk about the easy stuff about infrastructure, but forget about driver health, forget about enforceable standards, and forget about being paid for the job, and also forget about not only we're talking about single truck drivers and road owner drivers, but transport employers as well, transport companies.
Right. Now you mentioned infrastructure then, Glenn, and we've actually, as part of our seminar series, we've had some drivers come and tell us about like how they cope with the industry, and they were both parked in their truck at the side of the road, and you could actually see we've managed to find a tree to provide some shade. So one thing I know that you've been involved in is actually trying to improve the quality of the areas that are available to drivers. Like, can you give us an update on that? Is it?
Yeah. Yep. Thanks, Ross. Thanks for that. And this comes from experience of being out there and living in a truck. 12 years I lived in my bunk, and my truck was my workplace, my home, my kitchen and everything, but also talking to truck drivers. It's a long time since I've left truck driving permanently. Things haven't changed. The serious lack of quality rest areas in this nation is it's criminal. Certainly worse in other states. And I can't, Ross, for the life of me, it doesn't take a lot to get a bulldozer out, to plough up a bit of land, to bitumise it, make it fit for purpose, put some toilets in there, have a contract to have them clean, give our truckies quality rest off the road where they're away from the noise. So, this is really, really inexcusable. We talk and we hear figures of billions and billions of dollars being sprayed around the nation on road building projects. We don't hear it once, we hear it twice, we hear it 3 times, we hear it 5 times in some cases. Same money, same jobs being announced, still haven't started. But we're in there. And I know I've seen one that I can think of in Tasmania, where not only have they talked about building a highway, but actually putting rest areas in there for our heavy vehicle operators. But not only rest areas for our heavy vehicle operators, we need people with caravans need to pull over, and we need to actually start doing fit for purpose in 2021, mixing our caravanners, our holiday makers with our heavy vehicle industry is not a great idea when it comes down to getting quality rest. So yes, I have been on that. Also, Ross, the quality, and I haven't got a lot of control of this, but I've been working very closely with the fuel companies. Some of the disgraceful conditions that our truckies are subjected to under the guise of roadhouses, showers and toilets. This is a major conversation going on in this nation at the moment. I'm happy to say that the roadhouses and the fuel companies are lifting their game. Some have got a long way to go. But just to answer you on that, I'm happy to keep going down that path, Ross, but I know you do have other questions.
Well, I was going to ask on that, because we one of the factors that's come up repeatedly in our research is access for drivers to healthy and nutritious food. And most of those rest stops do seem to be attached to the large petrol companies now. And I'm not from the transport industry, so I love it if we're going on a road trip and I can pull in, I can have my Maccas or whatever, because it's the only meal I'm going to have like that for a little while. Is there any movement, I guess, in terms of them being able to provide healthier options for drivers, because that's all they've got to choose from all day, every day?
Yeah, look, that's a great question, Ross. And to those roadhouses out there, those family businesses that are supplying a magnificent contribution to our trucking families, thank you so much. You do a great job. But see, this is the annoying part, because we haven't had the voice of the truck drivers of the transport industry heard when these roads are being built. One of the recipes for disaster, and who in the heck thinks it's a great idea to have a truck pull over rest area and make sure there's a Macca's, a Red Rooster, and a fuel station there that you can get a sandwich that's probably made 2 days ago in a chocky bar. Now, I can't control what truck drivers eat. When I was on the road, no one was going to tell me what I had to eat. But nowadays, we've got far greater opportunity. You know, there are so many opportunities out there now where the trucks have microwaves and inverters. And I know that's the trucks I've been driving. I've been blessed to be with a company that provides part of it. Not only is there an ice pack so the drivers can get a quality sleep at night or during the day whenever they need it, but there's a microwave. And there could be arguments, Ross, that you want to get out of your truck. Yes, you want to get out of your truck. But who the heck wants to sit in a Red Rooster? So I don't have Red Rooster jumping all over me, but I'll say it as it is, Red Rooster or McDonald's. What options do our truck drivers have? You know, even in the great state of Western Australia, there's so many of the roadhouses now that were there when I was there, where you look forward to having a shower and sitting down and getting out of the truck. They're gone. They're still there. There's a building, but as long as you want to walk in and take, you know, there's a Bay Marie, so the options aren't there. So there is a lot of work to be done with our roadhouses, and I know we can't tell individual businesses what to do, but what we should do is promote the ones that are doing that and make sure that the message gets out there on the highways that these are the places that truck drivers should frequent, where you do get the opportunity for a decent meal, sit down, clean toilets, clean shower, and you're welcome with open arms.
Absolutely. So I guess that's you know, what sticks out to me there, Glenn, is actually, let's identify the really good locations and make sure that we know that. When I say we, make sure drivers know that they're out there and they're providing what they need. Now, we're going to talk a lot about solutions today, and I've mentioned it already that we've been saying that the driving health data tells us that there isn't going to be a silver bullet. There's not one solution. It's not going to be simple. It needs everybody within the transport industry working together. So from your perspective, from where you sit, what do some solutions look like? What are some ingredients that might need to be in place to actually make that 2% improvement that I mentioned? To you know, we know that it'll save money, but we also know it'll have a massive impact on the health and well-being of a lot of drivers. What are some of the ingredients from your perspective you think need to be in place?
Yeah, look, thanks for that, Ross. And in no order. Firstly, as we've touched on, quality, fit for purpose, rest areas, and many of them, and toilets and showers is one. We've also got to look at cab design. It is ridiculous in 2021. We can move anything in this nation that needs to be moved. We can move heaven and earth on the back of a truck. And yet in this nation, we can't get an extra 200-300 millimetres on a cab over vehicle because we're too worried about whatever room we can get being down the back so we can cart more cheaper freight for the client. This is ludicrous. Our cab over vehicles, and we know the American-built Western Stars, Kenworths and the likes, beautiful, big bunks, and a phrase I use all around the nation, there's nothing better than when a truck driver can stand up and actually take your pants off and put on another pair of shorts, standing up, get into your bunk, you can sit down and have a meal. We talk all the time about trying to attract women into the industry. Who in their right mind in 2021 wants to pull up on the side of the road, toilet paper under one arm, headlamp on the other, dodging mosquitoes and flies at night, and a torch in the other, making sure you don't step on a snake as you walk into the bush? Surely in 2021 we can have the boffin sitting in Canberra and sit there with the road transport industry and say, how can we get an extra 200-300 mil in the cab? We can have caravans that can have everything that opens and shuts, Ross. Toilets and chemical toilets and showers and kitchenettes and all sorts of stuff. We can't build that into a truck, but we can make sure we put an extra half a pallet on the back so someone gets their freight covered up the road for nothing, or at sometimes a quarter of the price that they should be getting paid. That's another thing that we need to go into. There's no excuses. And if any bureaucrat wants to argue me about weights and all that, I'm happy to have the weight. Don't start that rubbish. That's where we need to go. We also need to start talking about, Ross, when a truck is involved in an accident, it is the police, and I'm not knocking the police, not at all. The police do the investigation, whatever. The coroner might have a report if there's a death. But it's just seen as a road incident, a traffic incident. No, it's not a traffic incident. someone has lost their life in their employment, their role in employment. Trucks don't just fall over. The magic bullet that we were talking about in the mid-90s of, I've just gone blank, a chain of command and all this sort of stuff, where's that gone? There should be, in my opinion, a body similar to the Australian Transporter Safety Bureau, that if a truck is involved in an accident and there is a death, it's not a road death, it's a workplace death. You watch, mark my words, Ross, if it got to that, you watch the top of the supply chain start getting involved, thinking what's happened with their freights on the back of a vehicle that has gone over and there's been a death, or worse, head-ons and other drivers involved. That needs to be explored, because I think that will go a long, long way, mate, because the top of the supply chain doesn't even get involved in that sort of stuff. Their freight's on the back of a fatality. Oh, that's not their issue. Yes, it is their issue. Why did that happen? That needs to be done. I'll tell you another couple of things, and I'll be quickly about this. On a regulatory point of view, we need enforceable standards, Ross. Unfortunately, for the majority, as I said, the trucking industry are decent, hard-working men and women. There is an element out there that lets itself be pushed and bullied into a corner to cart for rates that can't be sustainable. So what do? They take shortcuts. I know that, and I know this from experience, there are a lot of companies out there that pay hourly. To me, hourly that's the gospel, getting paid hourly. But there's also some that pay kilometre rates while the drivers are driving. Then they pay loading and unloading rates hourly. And some of them do that extraordinarily well. And I support those companies that do it. But there are a number, Ross, who I would love to have the public conversation in front of the whole of Australia that exploit this, where drivers are on the kilometre rate, they're not getting paid, and they try to build us it's built into it. It's all built in. They're not getting paid for changing tyres, not paid for doing their pre-start checks. They're not paid for washing the truck. They're not paid while they're sitting on the side of the road because there's been an accident, the road's shut. They're not paid while the road's closed because of flooding. These are on the kilometre rate. And then there are ones that we know for a fact, my committee took this evidence, truck drivers telling me on the record, which could lead to prosecutions if the bodies got off their backside, which I'm not encouraging them to go out and have a look at it, for the ones that did give the evidence, sitting at DC's or clients' premises, waiting for a crane, waiting in line, all on the kilometre rate, not getting paid. Now, this is one of the biggest criminal acts in the road transport industry, and I'm not laying the blame at the feet of the transport company. I'm laying the blame, Ross, at the top of the supply chain. Transport companies should be paid for every single cent, like a demurrage. While that truck is sitting in a line or waiting for a crane or waiting for a forklift, they need to be paid. It's not good enough for the DCs, the mining companies, the steel companies and all these just to say, get in line, we'll get to you. You're not getting paid. Drivers cheat on their hours, Ross. That's the words of the drivers telling me. They won't put it in the logbook as sitting there as working time when it should be paid working time. So these are a number of things that I seriously believe can go a long way. So cab design, infrastructure with rest areas, also the opportunity for truck drivers to have the opportunity to home cook meals in their microwaves if that's what they choose to do. But all this sort of stuff, Ross, we've talked about it, we know about it. They would all go a long way to reducing that scary figure that your modelling has showed from, may I say, a Liberal point of view. Liberal being, I think it's probably worse, Ross, as we've gone through the pandemic. And I hope that encourages some conversations, mate.
Now, I've got one more question I want to put to you, Glenn, before I introduce our other two guests, and that is it's related to a number of the things that you've mentioned. Drivers told us as part of the study, but the thing that stuck out for me and has just been emphasised as a result of the pandemic is that drivers don't feel like they're valued by the public for what they do. Like you said, if there's an incident with a truck involved, it's like sometimes it's saying, well, the truck is the cause, regardless of what the actual circumstances are. But we've seen more than ever that drivers are essential. How can we improve, I guess, the public perception of what it is that drivers do, as a means of trying to support those drivers, at the very least from a public perception point of view.
Yes, and doesn't it? I know that there's Sally Tipping from Tipping's Transport in Dubbo has been hot to trot on this sort of stuff, where she started the Wave to a Truckie campaign. All these sort of things need to be done. I think that we need now, we're going to lose the opportunity. In the early, if we don't act now, in the early times of the pandemic, oh my goodness me, the trucking industry, oh, they were lauded as essential workers. We love our truckies, we love our trucking companies. And then we realised how fragile our supply chains are without our truck drivers, because everything in this nation is delivered on the back of a truck. Everything we eat, consume, wear, build, we used to build at least 5, 6, 7, 8 times. We know all that. So we need to have those positives. While we've got the situation now, and this is the sad part, for any young person sitting back, Ross, listening to our conversation now, thinking about leaving school to become a truck driver, would probably say, oh, geez, that doesn't sound all that great. Why would I do that? So we have to have a perception. Look, the industry tries its best to lift its perception. We've gone from the days of singlets, thongs and blue singlets, and make sure you had a mum tattoo on one arm and your first girlfriend tattooed on the other arm. Yes, we've come a long way. Has that resonated into being greater acceptance from the general public? No, I don't believe so. But until we get the industry working with governments to say our truckies and our road transport industry is integral to who we are as a nation, it needs a heck of a lot of work to be done. And it needs to be, firstly, it can't happen, Ross, if the trucking industry is not respected from the hallways of Canberra to start with and some of the state governments. And can I just say this, Ross? When I talk about 200 or 300 millimetres in a cab, I'm talking about a decent-sized bunk. Sorry, mate, I forgot to say that. Some of these cabs, these cab overs, massive cabs, huge dashes and all that. You get in, I got in a Volvo the other day, massive Volvo, 700 horsepower. The bunk's no wider than about my shoulders. So I just wanted to make sure I was talking about bigger bunks too, mate.
Okay, no, I got that. No, thanks very much, Glenn. Really appreciate your perspective on some of those challenges. What we're going to do now, we're going to quickly go to a holding pattern, and I'll be able to introduce our other two guests.
Thank you, Ross.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to introduce our two other guests, and the plan is to have a discussion about what some potential solutions might be. We've got Ruth Oakden from Toll. Ruth is a Group Manager of Wellbeing and Employee Support at Toll Holdings. Ruth has been part of the Toll Group's Wellbeing Program and has been at Toll for 22 years, which is a huge achievement in itself, Ruth. Initially, she introduced Toll's chaplaincy model of employee support, and this pastoral care program has, in response to community and organisational change, developed and evolved to become the broader and more proactive global wellbeing program. So, Ruth, one question I've got for you, and I know we had a bit of a discussion about this before. It would be great if you could describe a little bit about what Toll's approach is to looking after the health and wellbeing of its drivers, but then also in terms of what aspects of that might be adaptable to perhaps the smaller operators.
So the Wellbeing Program sits under our health, safety and environment pillar, and so it's an integral part of our safety-obsessed commitment to the wellbeing of all of our people, the physical and emotional wellbeing. The Wellbeing Program itself is definitely focused on mental health and associated wellbeing components, so the things that contribute to us being emotionally healthy, and tools to help us when we become emotionally or mentally unwell. We have had 22 years to practice this. We've had 22 years to make some mistakes and to start again. And I don't want to say we've got all the answers, but I think 22 years has taught us a lot about being able to provide a wellbeing program that is responsive to the needs of the diverse people in our organisation. So not everyone who works in transport works as a driver, but we have to remember that nothing happens in transport without the drivers. So really focusing on what we can do to support those integral members of our organisation to do the work of this company. Like I said, 22 years, we've got an established wellbeing program, responsive as well as proactively run training programs. We have a structured process of workplace support, mental health first aid officers, and skilled people within our workplaces. And that's a luxury that I recognise, and I appreciate that it's not available to the vast majority of people who work in the smaller organisations that make the transport industry run. I think if I was to pick one key thing that I would encourage any company involved in transport to consider for the benefit of their people is genuinely engagement with an employee assistance program. Anyone who's met me or talked to me for more than a few minutes knows that I don't generally speak highly of employee assistance programs. I think they're very expensive posters on the wall that companies are encouraged to shelve out shitloads of money to pay for an EAP poster on the wall. And as an industry, we use less than 2% of our people use EAPs. So that makes it a profoundly expensive poster on the wall, like the one behind me. It's expensive, and so for mum and dad organisations, smaller organisations that are counting every penny, it's a luxury that they don't feel they can afford. But every wellbeing strategy, every program that talks about how we look out of our people ends up with, and refer your employees to the employee assistance program, like as if that's going to be anything more than a poster. So my call is to encourage people to really make those businesses, the EAPs, make them work for their dollars, become engaged with them, really make use of the wealth of resources that those EAP posters represent. Bring the EAPs into your organisation, and don't think the only way that you can provide EAP for your people is by shelving out loads of money every month. You can arrange a one-on-one, a user pay arrangement with the EAP providers, and that might cost you $200 a month. That's affordable. We're talking about the wellbeing of our program. Encourage your EAPs to work with you, to work with the people, the individuals, to make the 4 sessions of an EAP run through into an extended program through a mental health care plan so that you've got engagement with them. Do not let the EAPs hide behind, well, that's confidential. Workplace is paying for it, providing that resource, so make them engage with you with return to work plans, return to work strategies, so that it becomes an active part of the whole employee experience for the employee and for their families. So really, if I could pick on one thing that we underuse that is out there, all of the resources associated through the Lifeline, Beyond Blue, Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds. We're going to be launching Are You OK for Trucks and Sheds? Are You OK for Air Industry? So really encourage organisations to look at the resources that are out there that are actually very good, but only useful if we use them.
Thanks very much, Ruth. I'm just mindful of the clock. I want to make sure I introduce Jerome as well. Jerome is the Program Director of the NRSPP, which is the National Road Safety Partnership Program. And so we've got a Monash connection here. It's delivered by the Monash University Accident Research Centre. Jerome's got extensive knowledge in workplace road safety management. He's got his own background in transport himself. That background includes leading the development of the NRSPP and other strategic programs during his time at the National Transport Commission. I know I haven't done the introduction justice there, Jerome, but Ruth mentioned the types of resources that are out there, and I wanted to get an outline from you about the Toolbox Talk program that the NRSPP has put together and is promoting.
Excellent, thanks for that, Ross. And we'll be dropping these, starting to drop next month in May. It's March now, so we're really putting them together. And the whole goal is with the Toolbox Talks is to make them, they're packaged, evidence-based, they're designed. We have a working group that will pull together, including companies like Bingo, Wholesome, Toll, Viva Energy, and there's a number of others, Comfort Delgro, and we're putting them together, and they have everything. So the goal is you can come in, you can download them, and that can then facilitate them with your drivers. The companies can do it. So you can read it within a few moments and you actually know how to hold a conversation. You can step through what sort of questions should you be asking. But I think one of the key differences is we also have a video that's going to support and translate it. It's based on adult learning of what is it, why does it matter, and how do you mitigate it. And we're talking with real drivers. And I must admit, this has been one of my highlights whenever I have an interview with a truck driver and we get their thoughts, because like what Glenn was talking about, truck drivers, they know innately what they want to do and what needs to be done. And you can draw them all out and they share these amazing experiences just of how incredibly professional they are. And they're telling the story, so it's them talking to each other. And some of the ones I've had, I've just put me in the best mood every day when they hear them and put it all through. And just as a couple of examples, one driver went through and he said, look, every day he gets up at 5 in the morning, kisses his kids on the head every morning, and says, I'm going to see you home tonight because I'm going to be safe. And each one of them, every driver has said, I love my job. And they're all extremely professional and they want to get home safely. And to do that, they've got to make sure they interact safely with everyone else out on the road. And they're just so passionate about and how they do it. And honestly, I love it. And one other point I want to draw on what Ruth was talking around, this whole, are you okay? We're interviewing a driver, I guess a fellow from Bingo, and he had this young driver fly into site at about 4 in the morning, came in quite aggressively and slammed his door. And so this guy walked down and goes, mate, what's up? They had a bit of a chat. And he goes, look, you're not in the headspace today to drive a truck. Come on, let's have a coffee and a chat about it. And he's like, well, what about my other mates? He goes, don't worry about that. We'll look after you. And send him home in a taxi. And they just checked on him the next day. How are you? And I think that's the sort of questions you need to actually translate from just saying, are you okay? Or those sort of questions to translating it in the workforce. And actually the mates, the peers, the drivers sing around it. And the goal of the Toolbox Talks is to draw these stories together and to share them around and just to stimulate it within the sector.
So who can access those Toolbox Talks, Jerome?
We'll be starting to drop them from in May, everyone. So they'll be entirely open, public. You can download them. And as an example, I was just talking with Highways England last week about it, and I showed them some of the ones we've got coming through. The first thing they said, can we borrow this? And can we spin some of our English truck drivers into this and share it over here because it doesn't exist? And all these organised, because I guess, toll, bless you, but you sit there and go, like when someone goes in for a Toolbox Talk, it'll be in the green toll and there'll be all this sort of stuff. But the goal of these is each one of them is designed. Swinburne University does the design for it. Monash does the research. We marry the two together. And each one of them is a standalone engaging piece. So it's not like you're going to sit there and go, oh, here we go again. The goal is to shift from a tick the box process to something that's really engaging conversationally piece.
Right. Thanks, Jerome. Glenn, I was speaking to Ruth yesterday and she said the most important thing really resonated with me when it comes to mental health and wellbeing is to create an environment where people are comfortable to have that conversation. Is that something that when you were a driver that anyone ever thought of? And how can we promote that within the industry now to help people be comfortable from your perspective?
Yeah, Ross, when I was in the industry, it was toughen up. Blokes don't cry. Just get on the road. If you're not up for it, someone else will do it. We've come a long, long way, thank goodness for that. And I know some of the companies that I've been talking to are doing some massive inroads into mental health. Yeah, look, we have to get to the stage and it's okay to say I'm not all right. It's okay to say I need a hand. And I think, Ross, on this, mobile telephones, if I can just touch base on this, and I said this at the Healthy Heads and Sheds launch, and I would given anything to have a mobile telephone when I was on the road, thinking at least you can Skype, at least you can say goodnight to the kids. At least when you've got reception, you can talk to your wife or your husband or your partner, and you could greet the kids when they got up in the morning. We didn't have all that sort of stuff, so it has come a long way. But also on that too, I'm thinking, is that a good thing all the time? Because then not only does your family know where you are, irresponsible controllers might know where you are too often, calling and putting the pressure on, or other things that are going on in other people's lives. So there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad, but we've just got to get that message. It's all right for truck drivers to say I'm not okay. It's all right for truck drivers to say I need some help, I need a hand. And I'm happy to say, looking at the work of a lot of the transport companies now, that's happening. We've come such a long, long way. Still a little bit to go, but that's got to be driven on the shop floor. And I love the concept of colleagues talking to each other rather than being shuffled off to an external third-party provider that's got a white coat on. So I'm really encouraged by a lot of stuff that's going on now, Ross.
Thanks, Glenn. Ruth, Jerome gave an example there where, you know, there would obviously be there'd be consequences for somebody if okay, someone's not right to drive the truck today. Absolutely, you've got to look after that person. But then that even that driver themselves was concerned about, well, who's going to do the job? How does Toll go about, I guess, making people comfortable to have that conversation, knowing that there might be follow-on, consequences? They don't want to let their mates down. They don't want to let, whoever it is. How does Toll actually make that a practical, something that happens on the shop floor?
So our safety-obsessed approach, and we mean it, safety-obsessed, includes safety talks, check-ins. And so we've trained up people at every level, but most definitely the guys that are sending the guys out onto the road to have informed and capable conversations. So they're comfortable and confident that they've got the skills to genuinely ask, are you okay? To look with wise eyes and pick up that maybe they're not okay, even if they say, yeah, I'm fine. And then to have some strategies to deal with that, which includes, mate, let's sit it out today. And these are why it's okay. This is why it's the better option. The ultimate outcome of not sitting it out, if you're not okay, is too expensive for anybody. Yeah. So the value of having someone say, okay, that's it, I'm going to sit in the yard for the day, I'm going to go home for the day, whatever I'm going to do, but I'm not going to get in the cab and drive off, is a wise and safe and good choice that we're allowed and we encourage people to make when it's true. Those safety conversations are critical for safety, but also for wellbeing and for genuine engagement. And, Glenn, there is a shitload of very wise people out there, very experienced people, giving them that little bit of training, that little bit of confidence to feel they can say, mate, are you okay? And not shy away from it. That's crucial tool in the whole safety conversation.
Jerome, you look like you wanted to jump in there earlier, mate. Have you?
I was just reflecting, one of the interviews he did with this guy was the youngest driver at Wholesome, and the comment he made, and I think this has come through a lot of the interviews, a lot of the old drivers said the industry has changed so much over the recent sort of decade, 20 years, and of your time, Ruth, as it turns out, I guess. But one of the things this younger driver said, once again, they all love their role, but he was sitting there saying he's learning so much from just sitting with the old timers and hearing their stories of how to do things the right way to start with. And I guess one of the crucial lessons he had and he's 26, and the point he made is you can jump over and avoid all these instances, but you've got to listen, once again, you've got to listen up and listen to their stories because they've been there, done it, experienced it all. And that's one of the big sort of things, like I questioned you earlier, how do you attract some of these young people into the industry? I think highlight how incredibly professional it is, highlight the passion of these guys and men and women in driving the trucks and why they love it, and then how they can learn from each other as well. Because I think just time and time again, I'm astounded by the diversity in the sector, but by how professional they are and how much these people love what they do.
I think if I was to try and pull together a common thread if we're talking about solutions, it seems like we really need to make sure that whatever solutions are involved, we need to include the drivers themselves, and we need to make sure that their voice is heard, their wisdom is respected, and their talent. I don't think people think of drivers particularly as talented, but that's something that needs to change because they've spent years honing, their craft, and I think that's something that needs to be emphasised. I'm not from the transport industry. I've never driven a truck. I can certainly acknowledge the skill and how different it would be to drive the vehicle that I drive. We're running out of time, so I wanted to give each of you, 20 seconds to say, well, if your comment about a future solution, what's required for us to actually improve the health and wellbeing of drivers? I'll start with you, Glenn, because you're on the top right-hand corner of my screen. You've got 20 seconds.
All
And
right.
I will make it 20 seconds.
Sure. Thanks very much, Ross. Firstly, governments need to listen to the drivers. They need to consult with the drivers. They need to sit down with the drivers. As Jerome said, they have the answers. They know all the problems. They know how to fix it. And that is my number one message. Sit down, listen to the drivers, consult with them and the transport industry, not certain people who anoint themselves as representatives of the transport industry.
Okay, thanks, Glenn. That was 23 seconds, but I'll let you go. Jerome, 20 seconds.
I'll build on what Glenn says. I love the demurrage idea that he put forward. I think that could just change everything so much. I think the other big one is get everyone to respect and understand the truck drivers. COVID has brought that this sector is crucial, and they need to. And people now are beginning to understand the importance of supply chains. And truck drivers are what keep everything moving around and keeping us supplied with everything. So respect the truck drivers and what the truck's on the road for.
Thanks, Jerome. Ruth, I left you to last, so you've got any extra time because you might want to fit in fountain somewhere, but never mind.
Diverse industry, diverse problems. There isn't one silver bullet, like Glenn said. But if we don't get the basics right, we are not going to get anything right. The basics are allowing the people in our industry to sleep right, to eat right, to hydrate and manage their alcohol consumption right, and giving them place to let go of the thoughts that are not helpful for all of those things. And very often that is in direct communication, but at the end of the game, to have the EAPs or that extra professional support engageable and accessible and respected. So the eat, sleep and drink right.
Okay, so you got 40 seconds, Ruth. You got double everyone else. So there you go.
Thanks, guys.
I just want to extend my sincere thanks to you all for joining us today. This has been the sixth seminar in our series, and it's great to talk about solutions. Really appreciate the time you've had today. We'll be back in a moment to wrap things up.
Thank you, Ross, and thank you to all of our speakers today. And thank you to you for attending the final event in the 2022 Driving Health Seminar Series. All of our seminars are available to view on demand at drivinghealth.net. We'll have a short 5-minute break before beginning the networking session, which you can join via the menu along the right-hand top of your screen by clicking the Driving Health Networking. We'll have 2 rooms in the networking session. Room 1 will be focused on encouraging discussion on continuing to find solutions for the transport industry, and this is your chance to have your say. Room 2, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions and meet the Driving Health researchers. Remember that numbers are limited and it's first in, best dressed. See you shortly.